I remember that night clearly, windless, like the street held its breath for something small and mean. I'd just gotten home from my late shift, slid my keys into the bowl by the door, and was reheating leftover pasta when I heard it. Not footsteps, not a doorbell. Just the soft electric click of the porch light turning itself on. At first I thought maybe the timer had glitched. It happened sometimes when the weather got cold, but when I checked my phone, the timestamp read 2:14 a.m., and I didn't remember setting any automation for that hour. I muted the TV and stood in the kitchen, listening. Nothing. Just the hum of the microwave and the faint buzz of the bulb outside casting a rectangle of gold across the front lawn. My house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac in the kind of neighborhood where people knew each other's dogs by name, and everyone left their garage doors open until sunset. Nothing ever really happened here. That's what made the silence feel wrong. I pulled out my phone again and opened the Ring app, half expecting to see a raccoon or maybe a delivery driver running late. The live feed flickered on, showing the porch bathed in that pale yellow light. What I saw made my throat tighten. There was no one there, just the empty doormat, the potted plant my neighbor had given me last spring, and the faint shadow of the mailbox stretching across the concrete. But the light was on, and I knew, without checking, that I hadn't turned it on. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the feed, waiting for something to move. The camera's motion detection hadn't triggered. No notification, no alert. Just the light, glowing like an invitation I didn't remember extending. I refreshed the app. Same image. Same eerie stillness. My first thought was that maybe the bulb was dying, flickering on as a last gasp, but the glow was steady, unwavering. I walked to the front window and pulled the curtain back an inch, just enough to see the porch from a different angle. The light was still on. I could see the faint outline of the door frame, the brass knob catching a sliver of reflection. And then I noticed something I hadn't seen on the camera feed. The motion detection zone on my Ring app had been edited. The blue boundary box that usually covered the entire porch had been dragged to one side, leaving the area directly in front of my door as a blind spot. I stared at my phone, pulse ticking faster. I hadn't changed those settings. I barely knew how. I opened the Ring history, scrolling back through the last few hours. Nothing unusual. Just a clip of me coming home at 1:47 a.m., keys jingling, shoulders hunched against the cold. But then I saw something that made my stomach drop. At 2:14 a.m., exactly 30 seconds before the porch light turned on, there was a 6-second clip marked, "Motion detected, front door." I tapped it. The video loaded slowly, buffering in choppy bursts. When it finally played, I saw my porch in the dark. No light, no movement. Just the grainy night vision feed and the faint glow of the street lamp half a block down. Then, right at the edge of the frame, something moved. A shape, tall and blurred, just beyond the reach of the camera's infrared. It stood there for a moment, perfectly still, before the clip ended. I replayed it 3 times, trying to make out details. The figure never stepped fully into view. It just lingered at the threshold of visibility, like it knew exactly where the camera could and couldn't see. I told myself it was probably a neighbor taking a late walk, or maybe someone cutting through the yards. But the way it stood there, motionless, felt deliberate, like it was waiting. My phone buzzed. A notification from the Ring app. Motion detected, front door. I opened the live feed again. The porch light was still on, but now there was something different. Tucked under the doormat, barely visible, was the corner of a piece of paper. I zoomed in as far as the camera would allow, but I couldn't make out what it said. My hands started to shake slightly. I hadn't seen that paper a minute ago. I didn't want to open the door. Every instinct told me to stay inside, lock the deadbolt, and wait until morning. But something about that paper, the way it seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, made me feel like I was already part of something I didn't understand. I walked to the door slowly, hand hovering over the knob. The porch light hummed faintly on the other side. I could see its glow bleeding under the gap at the bottom. I unlocked the deadbolt. The click echoed louder than it should have. I turned the knob and pulled the door open just wide enough to reach down and grab the paper without stepping outside. The night air rushed in, cold and damp, carrying the faint smell of wet pavement and dying leaves. I snatched the note and shut the door quickly, locking it again with trembling fingers. The paper was damp, slightly crumpled, like it had been folded and unfolded several times. I turned it over and felt my breath catch. The handwriting looked exactly like mine, slanted, cramped, the same looping G I'd always hated about my signature. It was just 2 words, written in blue ink: "Don't turn around." I stood there, staring at the note, my brain refusing to process what I was seeing. I didn't write this, I couldn't have. But the handwriting was unmistakable. I glanced at the door, then back at the paper, then slowly, against every screaming instinct, I started to turn. That's when I saw it. In the reflection of the brass doorknob, distorted and stretched like a funhouse mirror, was the faint outline of a face. My face. But wrong. The angle was off, the expression too still. And behind it, just barely visible in the curved metal, was the shadow of someone standing in the hallway behind me. I spun around. The hallway was empty. The living room light glowed softly in the distance. Nothing moved. But my phone buzzed again in my pocket, and when I pulled it out, my home Wi-Fi network had changed. It was no longer called Alex's network. Now it read, "Look behind you. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. I have missed you all. Missed all the experiences we've had together. It's been a rough ride as we're currently battling some technical issues, but trust me, we're getting everything back and running. So stick around. I need your support on YouTube now more than ever. Thank you specially for sticking around to this very moment. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now, back to the story. I remember that morning clearly because it was quiet. Almost too quiet. The kind of silence that makes you aware of every small sound. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the house settling, your own breathing. My mom had left for work around 7 a.m., and I was supposed to keep an eye on my little brother, Liam, until our dad got home later that afternoon. It was one of those overcast mornings in early November, when the sky looked like it might snow, and the whole house felt wrapped in a layer of stillness. I was sitting at the kitchen table scrolling through my phone, half watching a compilation video, when I heard Liam's small footsteps rush down the hall. He came into the kitchen with his eyes wide, clutching his stuffed bear under one arm, and said something that made my stomach sink instantly. "Mom's back," he whispered, pointing toward the living room window. I frowned, confused, because my mom had texted me maybe 10 minutes ago saying she'd just clocked in at the hospital. She was working a double shift. There was no way she was home. Liam looked dead serious, though, and when I asked him what he meant, he said it again, quieter this time, like he didn't want anyone else to hear. She was waving at me from outside. The way he said it, soft but certain, made the air in the room feel heavier. I set my phone down and crouched to his level, trying to keep my voice calm. "Liam, Mom's at work. Maybe you saw a neighbor or someone walking their dog." He shook his head, slow and deliberate. "No, it was Mom." She smiled at me. Something about that sentence made my hands feel cold. I told myself kids imagine things all the time. Liam was 8. He probably saw someone in a coat that looked like Mom's, or maybe he'd been half asleep and dreamed it. But when I looked at his face, he wasn't scared. He was just matter of fact, like he was reporting something he knew to be true. I decided to check the window, half expecting to prove him wrong and laugh about it later. I walked into the living room, pulled the curtain back, and looked out at the street. It was empty. No cars, no people. Just the gray stretch of asphalt and the faint outline of the neighbors' houses through the morning fog. I felt a small flicker of relief and turned back to Liam. "See? No one's there, bud." But Liam wasn't looking at me. He was staring at my phone, which I'd left on the kitchen table. The screen was lit up, and I could see the notification banner from across the room. FaceTime. Mom. I walked over slowly, my heartbeat ticking a little faster. I picked up the phone and saw that the call was already connected. The timer in the corner read 4:0:05:0:06. I hadn't answered it. I hadn't even heard it ring. But the call was active. I held the phone up, expecting to see my mom's face, maybe calling from her break room to check in. But what I saw instead made the kitchen feel smaller, colder, like the walls had shifted inward. The screen showed the upstairs hallway. Not from my mom's perspective, not from her phone. Just a still, steady view of the top of the stairs, the banister, the hallway runner leading to the bedrooms. The camera was inside the house, and it was pointing at a spot I recognized instantly, because I was standing about 5 feet in front of it. I turned slowly, looking toward the staircase in the living room. The view on the screen matched exactly. Same angle, same lighting, same faint shadow from the overhead fixture. My throat tightened. I whispered into the phone, barely able to get the words out. "Mom?" No response. Just the live feed of the empty hallway, silent and unmoving. I ended the call quickly, my hands shaking, and stared at the screen as it went dark. Liam tugged on my sleeve. "Is Mom coming home?" I didn't know what to say until I opened my recent calls and saw the entry. Mom, FaceTime video, 4M12s. But when I checked her contact info, nothing seemed wrong. Same number, same profile picture. I called her back, this time deliberately, pressing the FaceTime button and holding the phone to my ear as it rang. It connected immediately. No ringtone. Just a click, and then the screen filled with the same view. Upstairs hallway. Same angle. But this time, something was different. The thermostat on the wall, which I could see clearly in the frame, had been adjusted. The digital display read 51 degrees. I knew for a fact it had been set to 68 when I woke up that morning. I ran upstairs, phone still in hand, the feed still live. When I reached the hallway, I looked at the thermostat. It was exactly as the camera showed, 51 degrees. I turned back toward the stairs, and that's when I noticed it. On the bathroom mirror at the end of the hall, written in what looked like a child's fingertip, were 2 words. Hi, Maya. The letters weren't fogged. They were dry, like they'd been written hours ago and left to set. But I'd been upstairs this morning. I'd brushed my teeth in that bathroom. The mirror had been clear. My phone buzzed in my hand. Another FaceTime notification, this time from a contact I didn't recognize. Liam's tablet. I stared at the screen, my pulse hammering in my ears. Liam's school tablet was supposed to be in his backpack, turned off and charging in his room. But the call was coming through. I answered it, and the feed loaded slowly, pixelated at first, then sharpening into focus. It was a view of our front door, filmed from outside. The camera was shaky, like someone was holding the device at chest level, and I could see the faint reflection of the porch light in the glass panel beside the door. The angle was low, almost childlike, and as the image steadied, I realized with a cold, creeping certainty that whoever was holding that tablet was standing on our porch right now. I ran to the living room window and looked out. The street was still empty. No one on the porch, no one in the yard. But the feed on my phone showed the front door clearly, the angle unchanged, the image live and steady. I whispered Liam's name, and he appeared beside me, clutching his bear tighter. "Is that Mom's phone?" he asked, his voice small. I didn't answer. I just stared at the screen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. And then, slowly, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The camera's height, the angle of the shot. It matched exactly the height of the framed family photo we kept on the entry table inside, the one of our late father, taken the summer before he died. The same height, the same perspective, as if whoever was filming was as tall as he was. I ended the call and locked the front door, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the deadbolt. Liam asked me what was wrong, and I told him to stay close, to not go upstairs, to not open any doors. I called my mom's work number, but it went straight to voicemail. I called my dad, and he said he was 20 minutes out, stuck in traffic, and to call 911 if I felt unsafe. I didn't want to overreact. I didn't want to be the person who called the cops over a weird FaceTime glitch. But then my phone lit up again. Both calls, Mom's number and Liam's tablet, merged into a single view. The screen split down the middle, showing two feeds side by side. One was the upstairs hallway, same as before. The other was new, the attic hatch, slightly ajar, with insulation dust drifting down like slow snow. I hadn't opened that hatch in months. Neither had my mom. And as I stood there, staring at the screen, I heard it. A low, gentle voice, warm and familiar, calling my name from somewhere above me. It sounded exactly like my father. I stood frozen in the living room, phone trembling in my hand, staring at the split-screen view. The upstairs hallway on one side, steady and still, the attic hatch on the other, that thin line of darkness where the cover didn't quite meet the frame. Insulation particles catching the light as they fell in lazy spirals. The voice didn't come again. Just silence, thick and pressing, broken only by Liam's breathing beside me and the faint hum of the furnace kicking on somewhere in the basement. "Maya?" Liam tugged my sleeve. "Why did you say Dad's name?" My stomach twisted. "I didn't. You whispered it. Just now." I hadn't realized. I looked down at him, trying to keep my face calm, trying to be the responsible older sister who had everything under control. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking, and I could feel the cold weight of fear settling in my chest like a stone. I checked the time on my phone, 11:47 a.m. Mom wouldn't be home for hours. Dad was still 20 minutes out, maybe more with traffic. The house suddenly felt too big, too full of corners and doorways and spaces I couldn't see all at once. I pulled Liam closer and made myself think clearly. First, check the attic. Prove it was nothing. A draft that pushed the hatch open. Old insulation settling. Something rational. Second, if I couldn't find a rational explanation, we'd leave. Go sit in the car with the doors locked until Dad got home. "Stay right here," I told Liam, guiding him to the couch. "Don't move. I'm just going to check something upstairs, okay?" He nodded, clutching his bear so tight his knuckles went white. I hated leaving him alone even for a minute, but I couldn't take him with me. Not up there. Not until I knew. I climbed the stairs slowly, phone held out in front of me like a flashlight. The split-screen feed stayed active, both views live and glowing. I watched myself ascend on the upstairs hallway camera, my figure small and slightly grainy in the frame. The angle was perfect, like whoever was filming had positioned themselves exactly where they needed to be to capture everything. When I reached the top step, I paused. The hallway stretched out before me, exactly as it appeared on screen. The thermostat still read 51. The bathroom door stood ajar, and through the gap I could see the mirror with those two words written in careful, childlike strokes. "Hi, Maya." I walked to the thermostat first and adjusted it back to 68. The digital numbers changed obediently, the system clicking as it registered the new temperature. Nothing unusual. Just a thermostat doing what thermostats do. but I knew I hadn't touched it this morning, and Liam couldn't reach it without a chair. I moved to the bathroom next, pushing the door open wider. The mirror faced me, those dry letters stark against the glass. I touched one with my fingertip. The surface was smooth, cool, no moisture at all. These hadn't been written in steam. Someone had traced them with a finger, maybe in dust or oil, and they'd dried completely. I grabbed a tissue and wiped them away, the letters smearing into gray streaks before disappearing entirely. My reflection stared back at me, pale and tight-lipped. Behind me, the hallway was empty. My phone buzzed. The FaceTime screen had changed. The upstairs feed now showed the view from behind me, angled slightly downward, as if the camera had moved to the bathroom doorway. I spun around. Nothing. No phone, no camera. Just the empty hall and the faint creak of the house settling. But on my screen, I could see myself standing in the bathroom, tissue still in hand, staring at the doorway with wide eyes. The feed showed me in perfect clarity, framed in the mirror's reflection, and for just a second I saw something else. A shadow at the edge of the frame, too tall and thin to be Liam, passing behind the bathroom door. I stepped into the hallway fast, pulse hammering. "Liam?" His voice floated up from downstairs, small and frightened. "I'm here." The hallway was empty. Every door was open except one, Liam's bedroom at the far end. I walked toward it slowly, phone still streaming that impossible view, and nudged the door with my foot. It swung open with a soft creak. The room looked normal at first glance. Bed made, curtains drawn, backpack slumped against the desk. But then I saw them. Liam's toy cars, the little metal ones he usually kept scattered across the floor, were lined up in a perfect row, nose to nose, all of them pointing directly at the closet door. I counted them. 12 cars. 12 tiny vehicles arranged with the kind of precision Liam never had the patience for. I crouched down, my knees protesting, and reached for the closest one. A red Mustang, his favorite. When I picked it up, the underside was warm, like someone had been holding it. The closet door was closed but not latched. I could see the thin line of darkness where it didn't quite meet the frame. My hand hovered over the knob for a long moment, every instinct screaming at me to leave it alone, to take Liam and walk out the front door right now. But I opened it anyway. Clothes on hangers, shoeboxes stacked neatly, a winter coat Liam had outgrown last year. Nothing unusual, nothing that shouldn't be there. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding and closed the door, my hand still shaking. When I stood up, my phone screen had changed again. The split view was gone. Now there was only one feed, and it showed a new angle I'd never seen before. The attic. Not the hatch from below, but the interior, filmed from inside the crawlspace. The image was dim, grainy, but I could make out the wooden beams, the pink insulation stuffed between them, and something else. A phone. Propped on what looked like an old paint can, its camera pointed down at the hatch opening. The case was floral, pink and white roses. My mom's case. My mouth went dry. I looked up at the ceiling, at the attic access panel in the hallway. The hatch was still cracked open, that same thin line of darkness, and now I could see what I'd missed before. A faint glow coming from inside, like a screen illuminating the space above. "Maya," Liam's voice again, closer this time. I turned and saw him standing at the top of the stairs, Bear dragging behind him. "I heard something. I told you to stay downstairs." "I heard something," he repeated, and pointed at the attic hatch. "Up there. It sounded like someone saying your name." The air in the hallway changed. Colder. Thinner. I grabbed Liam's hand and pulled him toward the stairs. "We're leaving. Right now." But before I could take a step, my phone buzzed one final time. Both FaceTime feeds, Mom's number and Liam's tablet, merged into a single view that filled the entire screen. The attic hatch, filmed from directly below. The crack had widened, just an inch, maybe two. And through that gap, I could see the insulation drifting down like snow, backlit by the glow of the phone inside. And then, slowly, deliberately, a hand appeared at the edge of the hatch. Pale, adult-sized, fingers curling around the frame from the inside as if testing the weight of the cover. I didn't wait to see what came next. I scooped Liam into my arms and ran. The Xbox froze mid-game, right as I was about to pull off a headshot that would have ended the argument about who was better at Halo. Ben groaned and tossed his controller onto the couch cushion. Ryan laughed, already talking trash, but I was too focused on the screen to respond. The loading icon spun, and spun, and then the whole TV went black. "Dude, your internet sucks," Ryan said, reaching for his phone. "It's not the internet." I grabbed the remote and hit the power button. Nothing happened. The screen stayed dark for another few seconds, then flickered back to life, but not to the game. Instead, it showed a live camera feed. Our doorbell cam. The view of the front porch, the street beyond it silvered by moonlight, the driveway empty except for Ben's dad's car parked at the curb. "Did you switch inputs?" Ben asked. "No." I pressed the Xbox button. Nothing changed. The feed stayed locked on the porch view, and I could see the timestamp in the corner, 12:51 a.m. Ryan leaned forward, squinting at the screen. "Why's it showing that?" "I don't know. It shouldn't be." I cycled through the inputs manually, HDMI 1, HDMI 2, back to the Xbox. But every time it snapped back to the doorbell feed like the TV had a mind of its own. Ben got up and checked the cable box tucked under the TV stand. "Everything's plugged in, right? Maybe your security app is glitching?" I pulled out my phone and opened the home security app my parents had installed before they left for the weekend. 6 cameras total. Front door, driveway, backyard, garage, kitchen, and the staircase leading up from the basement. All of them showed normal feeds, nothing unusual, but the TV kept displaying the front porch, steady and unmoving. "Let's just restart it," I said, reaching for the power strip. That's when the feed changed. The TV cycled to a different camera, camera 4, the one pointed at the basement stairs. The angle looked down from the top step, showing the narrow staircase and, at the bottom, the 3 of us on the couch. Me in the middle, Ben to my left, Ryan to my right. The quality was grainy under the basement's dim lighting, but clear enough. Except there were 4 people in the frame. Ryan saw it first. He went completely still, controller frozen in his lap. "Jordan, look." I looked. Behind us, just visible in the shadows at the base of the staircase, was a 4th figure. Tall, maybe 6 feet, standing just outside the reach of the overhead light. The face was obscured, hidden in darkness, but I could make out the shape of a head, shoulders, arms hanging loose at the sides. "What the hell is that?" Ben whispered. I jumped off the couch and spun around. The staircase was empty. Just the wooden steps, the railing, and the door at the top, closed like we'd left it. No one there. I looked back at the TV. The figure was still in the frame, standing in the exact spot I'd just checked. Ryan scratched his cheek absently, and on the screen the shadow lifted its arm at the same time. Slow, deliberate, mirroring him perfectly. "Did you see that?" My voice came out too loud, echoing in the basement. "It moved when you moved." Ryan dropped his hand and stared at the screen. The shadow's arm lowered, matching his motion with a half-second delay, like a bad lip sync. Ben stood up, backing toward the stairs. "This is messed up. We should get out of here." Before I could respond, the TV changed feeds again. This time it showed the front porch from the doorbell cam. The image was sharp, well lit by the porch light, and standing in the center of the frame, calm and still, was me. I stared at myself on the screen. Same hoodie, same jeans, same messy hair I hadn't bothered to fix since this morning. The me on the screen raised one hand and knocked on the door. 3 slow, deliberate taps. "Jordan, you're right here," Ryan said, his voice tight. "How are you on the porch?" "I'm not." I looked down at myself, same hoodie, same jeans, and then back at the screen. The figure knocked again. Same rhythm, same casual posture, like whoever it was had all the time in the world. Ben was already halfway up the stairs. "I'm checking." "Wait," I started, but he was already at the top, unlocking the basement door. I heard his footsteps pound through the kitchen, then the sound of the front door's deadbolt sliding open. A pause, then his voice, confused and shaky. "There's no one here." I ran up after him, Ryan close behind. The front door stood wide open, porch light spilling across the steps. The street beyond was empty. No cars, no people. Just the soft rustle of wind through the trees and the faint hum of the streetlight half a block down. Ben stepped onto the porch and looked both ways. I swear I heard the knock. It was loud. I pulled out my phone and opened the security app, rewinding the doorbell footage to 30 seconds ago. The clip loaded, and there I was, standing on the porch, knocking. I watched myself knock 3 times, wait for a beat, then turn and walk calmly down the steps, out of frame. But I'd been in the basement the entire time. "Play it again," Ryan said, leaning over my shoulder. I replayed it. This time, I noticed something I'd missed before. When the figure on screen turned to leave, the motion wasn't quite smooth. It stuttered just slightly, like frames had been dropped, and the timestamp in the corner showed 12:53 a.m., 2 minutes from now. "That hasn't happened yet," I whispered. Ryan grabbed my arm. "What do you mean? Look at the time. It's 12:51. This video is showing something that's about to happen." We stood there in the doorway, staring at the phone, waiting for the clock to catch up. At exactly 12:53, the 3 of us heard it. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the door, clear and solid, like someone was using their knuckles against the wood. But there was no one on the porch. Ben slammed the door shut and locked it, his hands shaking. "We need to call someone. This isn't normal." I was about to agree when my phone buzzed. A new notification from the security app. "Motion detected, camera 7. I stared at the alert. "We only have 6 cameras. Ryan looked over my shoulder. "Open it." I tapped the notification. The app loaded slowly, buffering, and then a new feed appeared. The angle was low, almost ground level, pointing into a narrow space I recognized immediately. The crawl space under the basement stairs. The view showed wooden support beams, exposed pipes, and a pile of old storage bins my parents never got around to organizing. And wedged between 2 of the beams was a narrow duffel bag. Black canvas, zipper halfway open. As we watched, something inside it shifted. Not much, just a subtle movement, like the contents were settling, or waking up. "I'm not going down there," Ben said flatly. "We have to," I heard myself say, even though every part of me wanted to agree with him. What if someone's hiding in there? What if they've been there this whole time? Ryan grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, and we headed back to the basement. The stairs felt longer going down, each step creaking louder than before. When we reached the bottom, I pointed to the small access panel near the base of the staircase. It was barely 3 feet tall, held shut by a simple latch. I knelt and unhooked it. The panel swung open with a groan, and the smell hit me immediately. Damp concrete, old wood, and something faintly chemical, like rubber or plastic left in the heat too long. Ryan shone the flashlight inside. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the duffel bag about 6 feet in. It was closer than it had looked on camera, close enough to reach. "Grab it," Ben whispered. I didn't want to. Every instinct told me to close the panel, lock the basement door, and wait for my parents to come home. But I reached in anyway, fingers closing around the canvas strap. The bag was heavier than I expected. I dragged it out into the light, insulation dust clinging to the fabric, and set it on the floor between us. The zipper was already partially open. I pulled it the rest of the way. Inside was a wig, dark brown, almost black, cut in the same shaggy style I wore my own hair. Beneath it were 4 hoodies, all identical to the one I had on. Same brand, same color, same worn cuffs. And at the bottom, folded carefully like it was something precious, was a mask, a latex mask of my face. I lifted it with trembling hands. The details were perfect. The slope of my nose, the shape of my jaw, even the small scar above my left eyebrow from when I wiped out on my bike in 6th grade. The inside was smooth and still warm, like someone had just taken it off. "Jordan," Ryan breathed, his voice barely audible. I set the mask on the floor and we all stared at it. The features were frozen in a neutral expression, lips slightly parted, eyes empty holes that seemed to look at nothing and everything at once. And then, as we watched, the mouth moved. Not much, just a slight flex, like the latex was remembering the shape of a smile. The material stretched, the lips curling upward at the corners, and I swear I heard the faint squeak of rubber bending against itself. None of us touched it, but it smiled anyway. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that reflection in the doorknob. My face, stretched and wrong, and the shadow behind me that shouldn't have been there. By 1:30 a.m., I'd made a decision. If the porch light was going to keep turning itself on, I'd kill the power at the source. No circuit, no light. Simple as that. I went down to the basement with my phone's flashlight and found the breaker box mounted on the far wall. The labels were faded, written in my landlord's shaky handwriting, but I found the one marked "Porch Exterior" and flipped it off. The switch clicked down with a satisfying thunk. I stood there for a moment listening to the hum of the water heater and the faint creak of the house settling, then headed back upstairs. The porch light was off. The window showed only darkness and the faint glow of the streetlight down the block. I checked my phone. 1:47 a.m., 27 minutes until 2:14. I sat on the couch with my laptop open, pulling up the Ring app on the bigger screen, and waited. The minutes crawled. I made myself coffee, even though I knew I wouldn't sleep anyway. I paced the living room. I checked the breaker twice more, just to be sure. Both times, the switch was still in the off position. At 2:13, I sat down and stared at the live feed on my laptop. The porch was dark, just a vague outline of the doormat and the shape of the planter. 60 seconds. At 2:14 exactly, the porch light clicked on. I felt my stomach drop. The feed flooded with that familiar yellow glow, illuminating the steps, the lawn, the edge of the driveway. I ran to the window and looked out. The light was on, bright and steady, like I'd never touched the breaker at all. I sprinted back to the basement. The breaker switch was still off. I flipped it up, then down again, hearing the click each time. Nothing changed. The light stayed on. Impossible. A circuit can't run without power. That's not how electricity works. But the porch light burned anyway, casting its rectangle of gold across the grass like a door I couldn't close. I went back upstairs, my hands shaking, and opened the Ring app on my phone. That's when I noticed something I'd missed before. The motion detection zones, the blue boxes that tell the camera where to watch, had been changed. The area directly in front of my door, the spot where anyone would stand to knock or ring the bell, was now a blank space. The detection box had been dragged to the edges, covering only the sides of the porch and the steps. I tapped the settings to check the activity log. Last modified, 2:03 a.m. Modified by Alex's iPhone. My phone was in my hand. I hadn't touched those settings, but according to the log I had. I sat on the couch, staring at the screen, trying to make sense of it. Someone had access to my account. Someone had edited my camera settings from a device registered as mine. I opened my email and checked the login activity. 3 entries in the past 2 hours, all marked as successful. 11:47 p.m., Alex's iPhone, Lagos, NG. 1:22 a.m. Unknown device. Location, home, LAN 01. 2:03 a.m. Unknown device. Location, home, LAN 01. Home, LAN 01. My home network. Someone was inside my system, using my Wi-Fi, and they'd logged into my account from inside my house. I changed my password immediately, enabled 2-factor authentication, and logged out of all devices. But even as I did it, I knew it was too late. Whoever this was had already been inside my system for hours, maybe longer. They'd seen everything I'd seen, every camera angle, every notification, every message. I pulled up the archived Ring footage and started scrubbing through it, frame by frame. Most of it was mundane. Me coming home from work, a delivery truck passing by, the neighbor's cat crossing the lawn. But then I found something that made my breath catch. It was from 3 nights ago, time-stamped 2:14 a.m. The clip was only 6 seconds long, marked as "no motion detected," which should have meant nothing happened. But I played it anyway, advancing frame by frame. For the first 4 seconds, the porch was empty. Then, in frame 5, there was a flash of something in the brass doorknob. A reflection, distorted by the curve of the metal. I paused it and zoomed in as far as the resolution would allow. It was a face. My face. The same slope of the nose, the same jawline, the same shape of the eyes. But the expression was wrong, too still, too smooth, like a photograph of me instead of me actually standing there. And behind it, barely visible in the stretched reflection, was the outline of someone else. A second figure, standing where the camera should have been. I checked the next frame. The reflection was gone. Just the normal view of the empty porch. 6 frames. 1/3 of a second. That's all it took for someone to appear and disappear from my doorstep without triggering a single alert. My phone buzzed. A notification from my Wi-Fi settings. New network available. I looked at the list. My usual network, Alex's network, was still there. But below it was a second option, showing full signal strength. Turn around now. I didn't turn around. I kept my eyes locked on the phone screen, my back pressed against the couch, every muscle in my body tense. The notification stayed on screen for 10 seconds, then disappeared. When I checked the available networks again, it was gone. But my regular network had been renamed. It now read, "Look behind you." I forced myself to breathe, forced myself to think. I wasn't going to turn around. I wasn't going to give whoever this was the satisfaction of watching me panic. Instead, I opened a new browser window and ran a network scan, checking for connected devices. 3 devices: my phone, my laptop, and one labeled "Unknown," Ring doorbell, interior. There was no interior Ring doorbell. I only had the one outside. But according to my network, something was connected, streaming data, and it had been active since 11:52 p.m. I stood up slowly, keeping my phone in my hand, and walked to the front window. The porch light was still on. The street beyond was empty, the houses dark. The whole neighborhood wrapped in the kind of silence that makes every small sound feel amplified. I checked the Ring feed one more time. Still empty, still watching, still recording nothing. The sun started to rise around 6:15 a.m., pale gray light bleeding across the sky. I'd been awake for over 24 hours, and my eyes felt gritty, my thoughts sluggish. But when I looked out the window, I saw that the porch light was still on. It had been burning for almost 4 hours straight. I unlocked the front door and opened it slowly, staying on the threshold. The morning air was cold and damp, carrying the smell of wet pavement and car exhaust from the distant highway. I looked down at the doormat, and that's when I saw it. A strip of masking tape stretched across the threshold at ankle height. One end was stuck to the doorframe, the other to the concrete step, and next to it, drawn in pencil directly on the wood, was a thin horizontal line with a small arrow pointing inward. A measurement. Someone had marked the exact position of the tape, like they wanted to see which way it would move when I stepped forward, which way the dust would smear, which direction I would walk. I crouched down, careful not to touch it, and looked closer. The pencil line was fresh, the graphite still dark and sharp. Whoever had done this had been here recently. Maybe while I was in the basement checking the breaker, maybe while I sat on the couch staring at my phone. I stood up fast and slammed the door, locking the deadbolt with shaking hands. My phone buzzed again. Another ring notification. Motion detected. Driveway. I opened the app. The driveway camera showed my car, parked in the same spot I'd left it last night. Nothing unusual. But the timestamp caught my attention. 2:14 a.m. I tapped the clip and watched it play. For the first few seconds, nothing happened. Just the still image of my car under the streetlight. Then, slowly, the windows of my house visible in the background started to go dark. One by one. Living room first, then kitchen, then the bedroom. Each window turned black from the inside like someone was walking through the house, turning off lights, moving from room to room with methodical precision. The clip ended at 2:16 a.m. I'd been in the living room at 2:14. The lights had been on. I'd been watching the porch feed, waiting to see if the light would turn on again. But according to the dash cam, my house had gone completely dark, which meant either the camera was lying, or I'd been sitting in the dark without realizing it. I looked around the living room now, in the pale morning light. Everything looked normal. The lamp on the side table, the overhead fixture, the glow of my laptop screen, all of it exactly as it should be. But somewhere in the back of my mind, a question formed that I couldn't shake. If the dashcam showed the truth, then what had I been seeing? I ran down the stairs with Liam in my arms, his small body rigid with fear, his bear dragging behind us and catching on every other step. My phone was still in my hand, the screen glowing with that merged feed, the attic hatch, the insulation falling, the pale hand curled around the frame. When we reached the bottom, I set Liam down and tried to turn off my phone, held the power button until the slider appeared, swiped it, watched the screen go black. Relief flooded through me for exactly 3 seconds. Then the screen lit up again. The FaceTime was still active, still showing the attic hatch. The battery icon in the corner read 2%, the red bar barely visible, but the video continued streaming in perfect clarity. I pressed the power button again. Nothing happened. The feed stayed live, the image sharp and unwavering, as if the phone had decided it wasn't done showing me yet. "Maya, what's happening?" Liam's voice was small, cracking at the edges. "I don't know." I tried to keep my voice steady, tried to sound like I had any idea what to do. "We're going to leave, okay? We're going to go outside and wait for Dad." I pulled him toward the front door, phone still in my hand because I couldn't make myself put it down. I needed to see what it was showing me, needed to know if that hand was still there, if something was coming through the hatch. I grabbed the doorknob and turned. It clicked, unlocked, but when I pulled, the door stopped after an inch. The chain. The security chain we never used because Mom always said it made her feel trapped. It was latched from the inside, the small brass slider locked into the track. I stared at it, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. I hadn't latched it. I never latched it. We'd come in through the front door this morning, and I'd locked the deadbolt like always, but not the chain. Never the chain. "Why won't it open?" Liam asked, pulling on my sleeve. I unhooked the chain with shaking fingers and tried the door again. This time it swung open freely, cold air rushing in, and I pulled Liam outside onto the porch. The morning felt too bright after the dimness of the house, the sky gray and heavy with the promise of snow. I looked back at the doorway, half expecting to see someone standing in the hall, watching us leave. There was no one, just the empty entryway, the table with the framed photo of Dad, and the stairs leading up to the second floor. My phone buzzed. I looked down at the screen. The FaceTime feed had changed. It no longer showed the attic hatch. Instead, it showed the downstairs hallway from a high angle, like the camera was positioned near the ceiling, and in the frame, I could see myself and Liam on the porch, backs to the camera, exactly as we were right now. I spun around. The house was still empty, but on my screen, clear as day, I could see us standing in the doorway with our backs turned, and in the living room behind us, visible just over the back of the couch, was the corner of a picture frame. The one of our family that hung above the sofa. It was tilted, just slightly, like someone had nudged it, or like someone was standing behind it. I dialed 911, my hands trembling so badly I almost dropped the phone. The dispatcher answered on the second ring, and I barely managed to get the words out. Someone in the house, camera feeds showing things that weren't possible. We were outside, but I didn't know if it was safe. She told me to stay on the line, told me officers were being dispatched and would arrive in approximately 8 minutes, told me not to go back inside under any circumstances. 8 minutes felt like hours. I pulled Liam close and sat on the porch steps, phone pressed to my ear, waiting for the sound of sirens. The street was quiet. No cars. No neighbors walking dogs. Just the low hum of distant traffic and the soft rustle of wind through the bare trees. Maya? Liam's voice was almost a whisper. Why is the camera the same height as Dad? I looked at him, then back at my phone. The feed was still active, still showing that high-angle view of the hallway. And he was right. The angle, the perspective, the exact height from which the camera was filming. It matched perfectly with the framed photo on the entry table, the one of Dad, taken the summer before he died, standing in that exact spot with his arm around Mom's shoulders. The camera was filming from his height, his exact height, as if whoever was holding the phone was as tall as he'd been. My chest tightened. Grief and fear collided in a way that made it hard to breathe, hard to think. I wanted it to be him. Some impossible part of me wanted to believe Dad had found a way back, that he was watching over us, keeping us safe. But the hand in the attic, the chain on the door, the room staged and waiting, none of that felt protective. It felt wrong. It felt like something wearing his shape. The FaceTime feed shifted again. Both views, Mom's phone and Liam's tablet, merged into a single image that filled the entire screen. The attic hatch, filmed from directly below. The crack had widened further. I could see the glow of Mom's phone inside, propped on that paint can, and the insulation drifting down in slow spirals, catching the light like snow. Don't look at it, I told Liam, turning the screen away from him. But I couldn't stop looking. The feed held steady for several seconds, and then I heard it. A soft creak from inside the house. The sound of the attic ladder being pulled down. I stood up fast, pulling Liam behind me, and looked through the open front door. I could see the hallway, the stairs leading to the second floor, and from this angle, just barely, the edge of the attic cord hanging from the ceiling. It was moving, swaying gently, like someone had just pulled it. The dispatcher was still talking in my ear, asking if I was safe, if I could see the officers yet. I told her no. Told her something was happening inside, told her I could hear movement. She said they were 4 minutes out. Stay on the porch. Don't go inside. But the FaceTime feed showed something new now. The view had shifted to the downstairs couch, where Liam's school tablet must have been lying. The angle showed the living room from a low perspective. And in the frame I could see the dog, our golden retriever, Max, standing near the base of the stairs. His tail was down, pinned against his legs, and he was staring up toward the second floor with the kind of stillness dogs only have when they sense something wrong. Above the couch, the picture frame tilted a little more. Just an inch. Just enough to suggest something was behind it. Breathing. Waiting. "Maya, I'm scared," Liam whispered, pressing his face into my side. "I know. Me too." The sirens started in the distance, faint but growing louder. I could see the flash of red and blue lights at the end of the street, 2 patrol cars turning onto our block. Relief washed over me so intensely I almost started crying. The feed on my phone went black for a moment, then reconnected. This time it showed only one view, the attic interior. The phone propped on the paint can, the wooden beams, the pink insulation, and in the rafters above, barely visible in the dim light, was writing. Dark letters scratched into the wood, layered over each other like they'd been written and rewritten dozens of times. I zoomed in as far as the camera would allow. The words were dates and initials, spanning years. Some were faded, almost illegible. Others were fresh, the wood still pale where it had been carved. And at the top, in careful block letters, was a phrase that made my blood run cold. "Home, when you are." Below it, a date. The earliest one I could make out. It was from 8 years ago, the year Dad died. The police cars pulled up to the curb, doors opening, officers stepping out. I heard the dispatcher telling me they were here, that I could hang up now, that I was safe. But I couldn't move. I just stared at the screen, at those dates and initials, at the evidence of something that had been watching our house, watching our family, for nearly a decade. One of the officers called my name, asking if I was Maya Chen, asking if I was the one who called. I nodded, barely able to speak, and handed him my phone. He looked at the screen, his expression tightening, and motioned for his partner to check the house. "Stay here," he told me. "We'll sweep the interior and make sure it's clear." They went inside, flashlights out even though it was morning, moving carefully through the rooms. I stood on the porch with Liam, watching through the doorway as they climbed the stairs, as they checked each bedroom, as they finally reached the hallway and looked up at the attic hatch. It was open. The ladder was down, hanging into the hallway, and insulation dust covered the floor beneath it like fresh snow. I watched the officer climb up, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness above. He was up there for maybe 30 seconds before his voice crackled over his radio. "Second floor clear, attic clear, no signs of forced entry, no occupants." But when he climbed down, his face was pale. He motioned for me to stay outside and spoke quietly to his partner. They went back up together, and when they came down again, one of them was holding an evidence bag. Inside was a phone in a floral case. Mom's phone. The officer asked me when I'd last seen it, when Mom had last been home. I told him she'd been at work since 7 this morning, that she had her phone with her, that this didn't make sense. He nodded slowly, then showed me something else they'd found. Photos on his own phone, pictures he'd taken of the attic rafters. The writing was there, all of it. Dates and initials carved into the wood, spanning back years. And at the very bottom, in fresh carving that looked like it had been done recently, was a new line, Maya, 11/06 today's date. The officer asked if I recognized the handwriting in the older carvings. I looked closer at the photos, at the initials repeated over and over. D.C. David Chen, my father's initials. I started to answer, started to explain that my dad had died years ago, that there was no way he could have written this. But before I could speak, my phone, still in the evidence bag in the officer's hand, lit up with one final notification, a text message, from Dad's contact, the one Mom never deleted from her phone. The preview showed on the lock screen. "I'm outside." I looked toward the street. No one was there. Just the empty sidewalk, the parked police cars, and the gray morning light stretching across the lawn. But behind me, from inside the house, I heard it. A low voice, warm and familiar, calling my name in the exact timbre I remembered from childhood. Maya. I turned slowly, my whole body going cold. The officers were already moving past me, back into the house, but I could see from their faces that they'd heard it too. The voice came again, softer this time, drifting down from the open attic hatch like a lullaby. Maya, come home. We divided up without discussing it, operating on pure instinct and fear. Ben grabbed his phone and dialed 911, his voice shaking as he tried to explain what we'd found. Jordan headed upstairs to check the locks on every door and window, making sure nothing could get in from outside. And I stayed at the base of the stairs with the flashlight, staring at that crawlspace panel we'd left open, the duffel bag still sitting on the basement floor with the mask smiling up at nothing. "Don't hang up," Ben said into his phone, loud enough for me to hear. "We're still here. Yeah, all three of us. Someone's been in the house. We found—" He paused, struggling to find words that wouldn't sound insane. "Just send someone. Please." I heard Jordan moving around upstairs, the sound of locks clicking, windows rattling as he tested them. The basement felt too quiet without him, just the hum of the furnace and the faint buzz of the overhead light. I kept the flashlight beam trained on the crawlspace entrance, waiting for movement, for anything that would explain how that bag got there. The TV behind me flickered back to life. I turned. The screen showed camera 4 again, the staircase feed, looking down from the top step. I could see myself at the bottom, flashlight in hand, and Ben on the couch behind me with his phone pressed to his ear. But there was something wrong with the image. The shadow figure was back, still standing in the same spot at the base of the stairs, just outside the reach of the light. But this time it was moving. Not much. Just small, deliberate shifts that mirrored my own movements, except reversed. I took a step forward. On screen, the shadow took a step backward. I raised my hand. The shadow lowered its arm. I stopped moving entirely, holding myself perfectly still. The shadow did the same, frozen mid-gesture, like we were locked in some kind of horrible synchronization. Then Jordan's footsteps sounded on the stairs above me, descending from the main floor. "All the locks are—" he started to say, but his voice cut off when he saw the TV. "What the hell?" I pointed at the screen. "It's doing everything I do, but opposite, like a reverse mirror." Jordan walked down slowly, stopping a few steps from the bottom. On the screen, I watched both of us enter the frame, Jordan on the stairs, me at the base. And the shadow figure, still standing in its spot, slowly turned its head to face the camera. The TV went black. No warning, no static. Just an instant cut to darkness, and the basement fell into a heavier silence. The furnace hum seemed to deepen, dropping to a frequency I could feel in my chest. I heard Ben shift on the couch behind me, heard him speaking quietly to the 911 dispatcher, and then I felt it. Breath on the back of my neck, warm, steady, close enough that I could smell it. That same chemical odor from the duffel bag, like rubber and something sweetly artificial. I froze, every muscle locking up, my brain screaming at me to turn around but my body refusing to obey. "Ryan?" Jordan's voice came from the stairs in front of me, clear and normal. "Yeah?" I whispered, not moving. "Ryan, you okay?" Jordan's voice again, but this time it came from behind me. Same inflection, same tone, exactly the same. I finally turned, flashlight swinging around. Jordan was still on the stairs where I'd seen him, hands gripping the railing, face pale. Behind me, where the voice had come from, there was nothing. Just the empty space near the couch and the dark hallway leading to the utility room. Ben stood up slowly, phone still at his ear. "They said 5 minutes. Police are 5 minutes away." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, hands shaking, and saw that my camera app had opened on its own. The screen showed a live feed, not from my camera but from somewhere else. The angle was low, pointing up from ground level, and I recognized it immediately. Camera 7. The crawl space. The view showed the narrow space between the floor joists, the exposed pipes, the storage bins, and at the bottom of the frame, clear as day, were 2 pairs of feet. One was mine, white socks with the Nike logo standing just outside the crawl space entrance where I'd been moments ago. The other pair was identical, same socks, same stance, standing about 3 feet behind me in the shadows. "Jordan, look at this." I held out my phone. He came down the last few steps and leaned over my shoulder. I watched his face go from confused to horrified as he registered what the feed was showing. "That's not possible. You're standing right here." "I know." On screen, the second pair of socks shifted slightly, toes pointing toward my position, like whoever was wearing them was getting ready to move closer. The furnace kicked into a higher gear, the hum rising to something almost mechanical, and then I heard it. Laughter. Jordan's laugh, the same one I'd heard 1,000 times during late-night gaming sessions, but the timing was wrong. It came half a second too late, like an echo of something that hadn't happened yet. Jordan grabbed my arm. "I didn't laugh. I know." Ben backed toward us, phone still at his ear, his free hand pointing toward the TV. The screen had turned back on, but instead of showing the security feed, it was displaying what looked like our own doorbell camera. The view showed the front porch and the street beyond, everything quiet and still. Then the view switched. Living room window. Same perspective we'd seen before when the Xbox first froze. But now, reflected in the glass, I could see the 4 of us. Ben, Jordan, me, and a 4th shoulder, just visible at the edge of the frame, standing in the angle behind us. "We need to leave," Jordan said, his voice tight. "Right now." We moved together toward the basement stairs, but halfway up, Jordan stopped. "Wait, the sliding glass door in the kitchen. It's closer." We pivoted, heading through the utility hallway toward the back of the house. The kitchen was dark except for the glow from the microwave clock. Jordan reached the sliding door first and grabbed the handle. It didn't move. "It's stuck," he said, pulling harder. Ben and I joined him, all 3 of us yanking on the handle. The door rattled in its frame but wouldn't slide. It wasn't locked. I could see the latch was open. It was just stuck, like the track had warped or someone had wedged something under it. Jordan slammed his palm against the glass in frustration, and that's when I saw it. In the reflection, clear as day, was our group. 3 of us pulling on the door. And behind us, standing close enough that I should have felt their presence, was a 4th figure, taller than us, wearing a hoodie I recognized, Jordan's hoodie. "Ben," I whispered. "The chair." Ben understood immediately. He grabbed one of the kitchen chairs and swung it hard at the sliding glass door. The impact was deafening, glass exploding outward in a shower of crystalline fragments. The alarm system screamed to life, a piercing wail that filled the entire house. We climbed through the opening, glass crunching under our shoes, socks immediately soaked from the frost on the back deck. The night air hit like a wall of ice, but we didn't stop. We ran across the yard, the wet grass cold against our feet, heading for the fence that separated Jordan's property from the neighbors. Behind us, the house blazed with light. Every window, every room, the alarm still shrieking. I looked back once, just for a second, and saw the TV through the broken sliding door. It was still on, still showing a feed. But now it displayed the living room from a new angle, and I could see someone walking into frame. A figure carrying the black duffel bag like it weighed nothing, moving with casual confidence toward the coffee table. The figure set the bag down, unzipped it slowly, and pulled out the latex mask. The Jordan mask. It held it up to the camera for a moment, turning it slightly so we could see every detail. The perfect recreation of Jordan's features, the empty eye holes, the slight smile. Then the figure set the mask on the coffee table, face up, and looked directly into the camera. I couldn't see who it was. The angle was wrong, the face obscured by the hood. But I saw the hand rise, slow and deliberate, and press one finger to its lips. Shh. The TV went dark. We heard sirens in the distance getting closer. Ben's 911 call had gone through. The dispatcher had heard the alarm and help was coming. We huddled at the back fence, shivering, watching the house like it might move on its own. Jordan's phone buzzed. He pulled it out with shaking hands and looked at the screen. A text message from an unknown number. Just 2 words. Good run. The sirens were louder now, red and blue lights flashing at the end of the street, but none of us moved toward them. We just stood there in the freezing November night, staring at Jordan's phone, at the message that shouldn't exist. And then, from inside the house, we heard the doorbell ring. One soft, polite press. The same sound we'd heard on the feed earlier, when the copy of Jordan had knocked on his own front door. The alarm was still screaming. The lights were still on. But somehow, underneath it all, we could hear that single, gentle chime echoing across the yard, like someone was inviting themselves in, or maybe just saying goodbye. I wasn't going to sleep in my bedroom, not after what the dash cam had shown me. Instead, I dragged a blanket and pillow to the living room couch and positioned myself so I could see the front door without having to turn around. The new deadbolt I'd installed that afternoon gleamed in the lamplight. Brushed steel, top of the line, the kind that's supposed to make you feel safe. It didn't. I'd spent the day trying to convince myself there was a rational explanation. A glitch in the ring system. A neighbor playing an elaborate prank. Some kind of malware on my phone that was feeding me false data. But every time I tried to build a logical framework around what was happening, I remembered that hand in the doorknob reflection, the masking tape measurement at my threshold, the Wi-Fi network that had renamed itself to taunt me. Someone had been studying me, learning my patterns, my routines, my fears, and they were getting closer. The clock on my phone read 2:03 a.m. 11 minutes. I kept my eyes forward, resisting the urge to check the peephole or look out the window. That's what they wanted. That's what all of this had been building toward, getting me to turn around, to look behind me, to break. I wasn't going to give them that. At 2:13, I heard it. A soft hiss, like adhesive being pulled slowly from a surface. I stared at the base of the front door and watched as a strip of masking tape slid underneath, pushed from the outside. It came through the gap slowly, deliberately, the end catching on the worn weather stripping before sliding free onto the hardwood floor. The tape sat there, a pale stripe against the dark wood, about 6 inches long. I didn't move, didn't reach for it. I just watched it, my breathing shallow, every nerve in my body screaming at me to do something. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I picked it up with shaking hands and saw the Wi-Fi notification. New network available. Turn around now. The network name glowed on my screen. Full signal strength, like whatever was broadcasting, it was right outside my door. Maybe inches away. Maybe close enough to hear me breathing. I set the phone down carefully and spoke to the empty room, my voice steadier than I felt. "You're not me." The words hung in the air for a moment. Then the porch light exploded into brilliance, not the warm yellow glow I'd gotten used to, but something harsh and white, like a spotlight detonating on my doorstep. The intensity bled through every gap in the doorframe, through the peephole, turning the small glass circle into a bloom of pure white light that hurt to look at. I squeezed my eyes shut, stars dancing behind my eyelids. When I opened them again, the light was still there, unwavering, and my phone was buzzing continuously. Not a call, not a notification, just a steady vibration that wouldn't stop. I grabbed it and saw the screen filled with upload notifications from my cloud storage, Photos backing up. Dozens of them. But I hadn't taken any photos. I opened the photo app with trembling fingers. The newest image was time-stamped 2:14 a.m., 30 seconds ago. The thumbnail showed my foyer, shot from inside the house, near the kitchen doorway. I tapped it, and the image filled the screen. It was me. Standing alone in the foyer, facing the front door, my posture tense, hands at my sides. The photo was sharp, well lit, like it had been taken with a professional camera. But that wasn't what made my stomach drop. Behind me, barely visible over my right shoulder, was a hand. Just the hand, extending into the frame from somewhere outside the photo's boundary. The fingers were spread slightly, hovering inches from my shoulder, not quite touching, but close enough that I should have felt it. Should have known someone was there. The hand was wearing my watch, the same scratched stainless steel band I'd gotten for my birthday 3 years ago. I looked down at my wrist. My watch was there, right where it should be. I stood up fast, the blanket falling away, and backed toward the kitchen. My eyes swept the foyer, the hallway, every corner I could see. Empty. All of it empty. But the photo didn't lie. Someone had been standing behind me. Someone wearing my watch. Someone who could move through my house silently enough that I never heard them. Or maybe they were still there. The porch light finally dimmed, returning to its normal glow, and I checked the Ring app out of habit. The feed showed the empty porch, the doormat, the strip of masking tape at the threshold. Nothing unusual. No figure in the shadows. No one standing at my door. But the motion history showed a clip from 2:14, marked as person detected. I tapped it and watched myself open the front door, step outside, and walk down the porch steps. Calm, casual. Like I was heading to my car for work. Except I hadn't opened the door. I was standing in my kitchen, phone in hand, watching a video of something that hadn't happened. The timestamp said 2:14 a.m. The current time on my phone read 2:19. I was watching the future. Again. I grabbed my keys and my wallet, shoved my feet into the shoes by the door, and made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for whatever came next. I wasn't going to give this thing, whatever it was, another chance to study me, to copy me, to take another piece of my life. I unlocked the new deadbolt, pulled the door open fast, and stepped outside before I could second-guess myself. The morning air was frigid, sharp enough to make my eyes water. The street was empty, houses dark, the neighborhood wrapped in that pre-dawn stillness where nothing moves. I went straight to my car, keys already out, and unlocked it with the fob. The interior light came on, illuminating the familiar space, coffee cup in the holder, work badge on the dash, phone charger plugged into the console. Normal. Safe. I got in and locked the doors immediately, then sat there for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel trying to slow my breathing. Through the windshield I could see my house, the porch light still on. The front door closed, though I didn't remember closing it. Every window dark except for the living room lamp I'd left burning. I started the engine and pulled up the dash cam footage on my phone, scrolling back to last night. The camera had been recording while I slept, capturing the quiet street, the occasional car passing by, the gradual lightening of the sky toward dawn. And at exactly 2:14 a.m., I watched my house die. Window by window the lights went out. Living room first, the lamp I'd been sitting next to, the one I knew for certain had been on. Then the kitchen. Then the bedroom I wasn't using. One by one, every lit window in my house turned black, the darkness spreading from the inside like something was moving through the rooms, flipping switches, closing doors, erasing any sign of life. The sequence took 43 seconds. When it was done, my house looked abandoned, dead. Like no one had lived there for months. But I'd been inside. I'd been awake. I'd been sitting on that couch watching the door, and the lamp had been on the entire time. I would have noticed if the lights went out. I would have been sitting in the dark. Unless I hadn't been sitting there at all. Unless whatever had taken that photo in the foyer, whatever had worn my watch and stood behind me, had already figured out how to be me better than I could. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb, not looking back. The sky was starting to lighten, pale gray bleeding into the darkness at the edges. I drove without direction, just putting distance between myself and that house, between myself and whatever was waiting inside it. At the first red light, my car's infotainment screen flickered on, the display cycling through its usual startup sequence: time, temperature, navigation. Then a notification appeared at the bottom of the screen. Wi-Fi network available, home LAN 01. I stared at it, hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. I was 3 miles from my house. 3 miles. There was no way my home network should reach this far. No router had that kind of range. The notification stayed on screen, the connect button glowing softly, waiting. The light turned green. The car behind me honked. I pressed the gas and drove through the intersection, watching in my rearview mirror as my house disappeared behind the trees, behind the curve of the road, behind the safety of distance. But the notification didn't disappear. It stayed on the screen, following me, the signal strength showing full bars no matter how far I drove. Like it wasn't coming from my house at all. Like it was coming from inside the car. The officers wanted me to stay on the porch. They insisted, actually, using that firm but gentle tone cops use when they think you're about to do something stupid. But when that voice called my name from the attic, in my father's exact timbre, with the same slight rasp he'd had from years of smoking before he quit, something in me broke. Or maybe it snapped into place. "I need to see," I told the officer holding Mom's phone in the evidence bag. "I need to know what's up there." He started to argue, but his partner cut him off. "Let her. We'll go with her." So we went inside. Me, both officers, and Liam clinging to my hand so tight I could feel my fingers going numb. The house felt different now, in the daylight with the police present. Smaller somehow. Less threatening. But the attic ladder still hung from the ceiling, and the insulation dust still covered the floor beneath it like evidence of something that couldn't be explained away. I walked to the base of the ladder and looked up. The opening was dark, just a rectangle of shadow, but I could see the faint glow of a screen somewhere in the depths above. "Maya." The voice came again, softer this time, barely a whisper. "Come home." One of the officers put his hand on his weapon. The other raised his flashlight, aiming it up into the darkness. They saw what I saw. Nothing. No shape, no figure, just the empty attic and that distant glow. "Stay here with your brother," the first officer said, already moving toward the ladder. "No." I surprised myself with how firm my voice was. "I'm going up. He was my father. If something's using his voice, I need to see it." They exchanged a look, that silent conversation partners have, and finally nodded. "We go first. You stay behind us. Understood?" I agreed, even though I knew I was lying. When it came down to it, I'd do whatever I had to do. The first officer climbed, his boots heavy on the aluminum steps. The second followed, and then I came after, leaving Liam at the bottom with instructions to run to the neighbor's house if anything happened. He nodded, wide-eyed, clutching his bear. The attic was exactly as I remembered it from the few times I'd been up here as a kid. Low ceiling, exposed beams, pink insulation stuffed between the joists. The air was thick with dust and the smell of old wood and stale heat. The officer's flashlight swept across the space, catching the phone propped on an old paint can, exactly where the feed had shown it. Mom's phone, the floral case unmistakable even in the dim light. But it was the floor that made me stop. The insulation showed tracks, footprints clear as day pressed into the pink material. They weren't fresh. The insulation had settled, the impressions old. But there were dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They circled the attic space in a pattern that made no sense, looping back on themselves, crossing and recrossing, like someone had been pacing up here for hours, days, years. I followed the tracks with my eyes, tracing their path. They spiraled inward from the edges, circled the phone multiple times, then led to a spot directly above where the hallway would be, directly over the front door. That's where the final loop ended, where the most recent prints were deepest, like someone had stood there for a long time, looking down, waiting. One of the officers picked up the phone carefully, using a glove. The FaceTime app was still active, still recording, the red button glowing. He ended the call and the screen went dark. "Is this your mother's phone?" he asked. "Yes, but she has it with her, at work. We'll need to verify that." He slipped it into an evidence bag, then aimed his flashlight at the rafters above. Jesus! I looked up and felt my breath catch. The wooden beams were covered in writing, carved into the wood with something sharp. A knife, maybe? Or a screwdriver? Dates and initials, layered so thick in some places that the words overlapped into an illegible mess. But I could make out enough. Years spanning back almost a decade, and the same initials over and over again. D.C. David Chen. My father. "Home when you are," was carved in large block letters near the center beam, the words deep and deliberate. Below it, dates were arranged in columns like a calendar, some with check marks beside them, others circled. The earliest date I could find was from 8 years ago, November 12th, the day of my father's funeral. "We need to document this," the second officer said, pulling out his phone to take photos. I don't know what this is." I reached up and touched one of the carvings. The wood was rough, the letters deep. This had taken time, hours, maybe. Someone had been up here, night after night, carving these messages while we slept below. Or something had been up here. Something that knew my father's handwriting, his voice, his height. Something that had been watching our family since the day we buried him. "Ma'am, we need to get you out of here," the first officer said, his hand on my shoulder. "This is a crime scene now." I nodded, but as I turned to leave, the phone in the evidence bag lit up. The FaceTime app had opened on its own, connecting to a call without anyone touching it. The officers and I watched as the screen filled with a new image. The living room, shot from that same low angle, from where Liam's tablet would be on the couch. The view showed Liam sitting exactly where I'd left him, at the base of the ladder, looking up toward us with his bear in his lap. Max, our dog, sat beside him, but Max wasn't looking at Liam. He was staring at the picture frame above the couch, the family photo. And as we watched, the frame tilted just slightly, moving forward like someone was leaning against the wall behind it. I could hear breathing on the feed, slow, steady, coming from behind the frame. I didn't wait for the officers. I ran for the ladder, climbed down so fast I nearly fell, and grabbed Liam. "Garage! Now!" The officers were shouting behind me, trying to keep up, but I was already pulling Liam through the kitchen toward the garage door. I could see the red and blue lights washing through the blinds, could hear more sirens approaching, but all I could think about was getting Liam out of this house. I yanked open the garage door, pulled Liam through, and we burst into the cold morning air just as 3 more patrol cars pulled up. An officer grabbed me, asking if I was hurt, if we were safe, and I could barely form words to answer. They swept the house again, this time with more officers, more lights, more urgency. They checked every room, every closet, every corner. They pulled down the attic ladder again and searched the space thoroughly, documenting everything with photos and measurements. When they finally came out, the lead officer looked shaken. "There's no one inside," he said. "No signs of forced entry, no indication anyone else was in the house besides you and your brother." "But the carvings!" "We documented everything. The writing in the attic, the footprints in the insulation, all of it. We'll have forensics come out and analyze it, but ma'am," he hesitated, Some of those carvings are old, years old. If someone's been accessing your attic, they've been doing it for a long time. They asked me questions I couldn't answer. When was the last time someone checked the attic? Had we noticed anything unusual before today? Did my father have any history of mental illness? I told them everything I could remember, but it felt inadequate. How do you explain that your dead father's voice called you from the attic? That cameras showed views that shouldn't exist? That something in your house knew exactly where you'd be before you got there? One of the officers came out of the house holding Mom's phone, still in the evidence bag. "Ma'am, there's something you should see." He showed me the screen. The Messages app was open, showing a conversation with my dad's contact, the one Mom had kept all these years, never able to delete it. There was a draft text queued up, unsent, cursor blinking at the end. 2 words in the text field. "I'm outside." I looked at the timestamp. The draft had been created at 2:47 a.m. hours ago, waiting to be sent. And as I stared at it, I saw the cursor move. Someone was typing. A 3rd word appeared. Still. The officer pulled the phone away quickly, but I'd already seen it, already understood what it meant. Whatever had been in our attic, whatever had carved those messages and tracked through the insulation and called my name in my father's voice, wasn't done. It had just been waiting, watching, learning. And now it knew we knew. The officer told me we couldn't stay in the house, not until they'd finished investigating, not until they understood what was happening. He arranged for us to stay with my aunt across town, gave me his card, promised he'd call as soon as they had answers. But as we drove away in the back of a patrol car, Liam asleep against my shoulder and Max panting in the seat beside us, I looked back at our house one last time. Every window was dark, every blind closed. But on the front porch, just barely visible in the morning light, the doorbell camera was active. The small LED glowed red, recording. And standing just outside the camera's frame, in the spot the motion sensors had been edited to ignore, I saw the shadow of someone tall. Someone who stood exactly the way my father used to stand, with his weight on one leg and his hands in his pockets. The figure didn't move as we drove past, didn't wave, didn't acknowledge us at all. It just watched, waiting for us to come home. The police found no one in the house. They checked every room twice, opened every closet, searched the crawl space with thermal imaging cameras that showed nothing but cold concrete and empty air. But they found other things, things that made the lead detective's face go tight and professional in a way that scared me more than the mask had. A single hair stuck to the inside of the latex mask. Dark brown, about 3 inches long. They bagged it, tested it on site with some kind of portable kit, and the detective pulled my dad aside to talk in low voices by the patrol car. When Dad came back, his face was pale. "They say it's a DNA match. The hair is yours." "That's impossible. I never touched it." "I know." He put his hand on my shoulder, gripping tight like he was afraid I might disappear. "But that's what the test says." The detective showed us the duffel bag zipper, where they'd lifted a partial fingerprint using some kind of powder and tape. Clear enough to run through their database. Clear enough to come back with a match. Jordan Hale. My name. My print. Like I'd opened that bag myself and filled it with copies of my own clothes, my own hair, my own face. "Son," the detective said, and his voice was careful, measured. "Have you been experiencing any gaps in memory? Any time you can't account for?" "No, I've been with Ben and Ryan all weekend. They can tell you." "We'll need to speak with them, get their statements. But Jordan..." He paused, choosing his words. "Sometimes people do things and don't remember. Stress, trauma, sleepwalking. I didn't do this." My voice came out too loud, echoing in the cold morning air. "I didn't put that stuff in the crawl space. I didn't carve my own face. Someone else did this. Something else." The detective nodded, but I could see he didn't believe me. None of them did. They saw a scared kid, a bag full of evidence, and a house with no signs of forced entry. The math was simple for them. I was the only answer that made sense. My parents arrived 20 minutes later, Mom's car skidding to a stop at the curb. She was out before the engine stopped, running toward me, Dad right behind her. The detective intercepted them, explaining in that same careful voice what they'd found. I watched my mom's face crumble, watched my dad's jaw clench, and I knew what they were thinking even if they wouldn't say it out loud. They were wondering if I'd done this, if their son was capable of something they couldn't understand. "We're not staying here," Dad said after a long silence. "We'll go to a hotel tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next." "Mr. Hale, we'll need Jordan available for more questions. Then you know where to find us." Dad's voice was steel. "But we're not sleeping in this house. Not tonight." We packed bags in silence, while officers stood in the hallway watching. I grabbed clothes, my phone charger, my laptop, trying not to look at the crawl space panel that was still open. The duffel bag still sitting on the basement floor in its evidence markers like a crime scene. Ben and Ryan had been taken home by their parents hours ago, both of them giving statements, both of them looking at me like they weren't sure who I was anymore. At the Comfort Inn off the highway, Mom got us 2 rooms, one for her and Dad, one for me. Like they needed space, like they needed to talk about me without me hearing. I lay on the scratchy comforter, staring at the ceiling, listening to their voices murmur through the thin wall. I couldn't make out words, but I didn't need to. I knew what they were saying. My phone buzzed around 10 p.m., a notification from the home security app. I almost deleted it without looking. I didn't want to see that house again. Didn't want to think about what was in the crawl space or how my fingerprints had gotten on that zipper, but something made me tap it anyway. Motion detected. Front porch. The thumbnail showed a figure standing on our porch, backlit by the hallway light bleeding through the front door. Tall, wearing a hoodie, head tilted to the side in a way that made my stomach twist because I knew that posture. I'd seen it in mirrors, in photos, in videos my friends had taken. It was how I stood when I was listening to something, when I was trying to figure something out. The silhouette stood there for 30 seconds, perfectly still, then turned and walked out of frame. The clip ended. I stared at the thumbnail, hands shaking. That was my house, my porch. And that figure moved like me, stood like me, probably even breathed like me. But I was here, 3 miles away, lying on a motel bed with my parents arguing in whispers next door. The house knew how to sign my name now, not just on paper, in fingerprints, in DNA, in the way I moved and stood and existed in the world. It had studied me so carefully that it could be me better than I could. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. I just lay there scrolling through my phone, reading articles about identity theft and home invasions and cases of people who woke up to find their lives had been copied, their accounts drained, their names used for things they never did. But none of it matched what had happened to us. None of it explained the mask or the voice or the way the feeds had shown the future before it happened. Around 2 a.m., my phone lit up with a new notification. Family group chat. Dad, Mom, and me. Someone had posted a photo. The thumbnail showed our living room. Empty. Lights off. The TV dark. The couch where we'd been sitting just hours ago now vacant. But the angle was wrong. Too high, like it had been taken from the doorway to the kitchen. And the timestamp said it was taken at 1:47 a.m. tonight, while we were at the motel. No one in my family had posted it. The message showed unknown as the sender. I screenshot it and sent it to the detective, my fingers fumbling on the keyboard. But before I could type out an explanation, the photo disappeared. Deleted. The whole message vanished from the chat like it had never existed. Except I had the screenshot. Proof that something was still in our house, still watching, still documenting, still pretending to be us. 3 weeks later, I was scrolling through the news on my phone, trying to distract myself from the fact that we still hadn't moved back home, when I saw an article about a case in Ohio. A guy named Alex Reed, who'd fled his house after experiencing what the article called a sophisticated technological harassment campaign. The Ring cameras, the edited settings, the impossible timing. It all sounded familiar. Too familiar. I clicked through to the comments and found one from someone named Maya Chen, saying she'd experienced something similar. Cameras showing views they shouldn't have. A presence that knew where they'd be before they got there. I typed out a reply before I could stop myself. Me too. We started a group chat, the three of us, comparing notes, sharing screenshots and videos and the evidence the police had collected and ultimately dismissed. Alex's porch light that turned on without power, Maya's FaceTime calls from inside her own house, my latex mask with my DNA on it, different houses, different cities, but the same pattern, the same feeling of being studied, copied, replaced. None of us had answers. The police thought we were lying or crazy or orchestrating some kind of hoax for attention. Our families didn't know what to believe, but we knew what we'd seen. We knew what had happened, and we knew it wasn't over. It was a Tuesday night, exactly 1 month after the incident, when all three of us received the same notification. Alex was in his new apartment in Columbus, a 4th-floor walk-up with no doorbell camera because he couldn't stomach the thought of another Ring device. His phone buzzed at 2:14 a.m. Of course it did, with a text from an unknown number. Maya was tucking Liam into bed at her aunt's house, where they'd been staying while their parents decided whether to sell. Her phone lit up on the nightstand at the exact same moment, a text bubble appearing from her mom's contact. She watched it type out 3 dots, then delete. Type again. Delete. The attic hatch in the hallway behind her settled with a soft creak, dust drifting down. And me, in our new rental house across town, smaller and cheaper and far away from that cul-de-sac, was lying in my new bedroom when the family group chat populated with another photo. Our old living room, the one we'd left behind. Empty. Dark. But the TV was on, showing a paused image of the three of us on the basement couch that last night. The three of us. And the 4th figure behind us. We all got the same message, arriving on different devices at the exact same time. Smile. That's all it said. One word. And underneath it, barely audible through our phone speakers, through our closed windows, through the distance and the walls and the desperate hope that we'd finally gotten away, we heard it. A doorbell. One soft, polite press. The same gentle chime. In Ohio. In our aunt's house. In our new rental. All at once. Impossible. But there it was, echoing through the quiet night, promising that wherever we went, whatever new homes we tried to build, something would always be standing just outside the frame, waiting for us to answer, waiting for us to come home.